Hi, my name is Alan Court, owner of the Kiddywinkles Early Learning Centres in New Zealand. Welcome to our Building Kids for Greatness podcast series, where we've had the opportunity to interview some wonderful celebrities, including New Zealand's own icon Susie Cato, Hollywood actors Vince Vaughn and Sean Cannon. And today on Building Kids for Greatness, we're talking with someone who's lived high-performance sport from the inside, but also understands the early years where it all really begins. Our guest is a double Olympian and former New Zealand Black Sticks hockey player who was talent identified at primary school and who went on to represent New Zealand on the world stage. But what really makes this conversation special is her work in early childhood, exploring the link between movement and brain development in children from birth to 5, and how the way adults show up in those early years can shape confidence for life. It's a conversation about movement, mindset, and helping kids thrive, long before winning or losing even matters. A very warm welcome to Jamie Claxton.
Thanks, Alan, for having me on the show. There's a long list of very wonderful people that I'm following.
Well, you've had a great history, and actually people would know you as, in your hockey days, as Jamie Proven. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Do you know what? I was actually really lucky, and my dad was very happy before he passed to know that I played my first Olympics with my maiden name, Jamie Proven, and I played my second Olympics with my married name, Jamie Claxton. So I have both the shirts to represent.
Well, you're famous, you're doubly famous. So.
Yeah, exactly right.
Fantastic. Now, you were a talent identified at primary school, which is a pretty incredible thing. When you look back now, what do you think your parents did that really helped set you up without putting pressure on you?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's one that I am probably asked a lot, and it's also one that's really interesting now that I have kids and I've brought them through their age group, and I'm watching other parents on the sideline, and I'm also watching my own behaviour on the sideline. And when I think back to how my parents supported me, I never had loud parents. I never had pushy parents. My parents were never the parents on the sideline yelling and screaming. My dad used to stand behind the goal that we were attacking into. And I remember him saying to me once, you know, I'll look at the goalkeeper and I'll see the weakness and I'll stand where her weakness is and you just aim for that. Or at half time,
advice there.
Yeah, great advice, because he was a sportsman. So he knew all about spatial awareness and gameplay, and he could spot that. And at half time, you know, I would walk off the field and they would stand at the halfway point where I would walk off. And if I chose to ask them a question or stop and talk, I would. And if I didn't, then they wouldn't push. They were just there. I just remember my parents always being there. They always took me to trainings. They were always at my games. And then when I asked them questions, they weren't afraid to give me constructive feedback. And I think that's really critical. And I feel like we are in an era of where praising is positive and it's encouraged and it should be. But we're also in an era where I do believe there is still a place for constructive criticism in kids, and not towards, you know, but I want to also talk about the difference between skill and commitment in kids, no matter what they're going into. You know, I wouldn't be giving feedback to my kids necessarily based on their skill, but I would be giving feedback based on their commitment. How hard did you try? Did you turn up and do all the things you were supposed to do before the game? You know, even from an early age, making sure they clean their boots. So those are the things that I remember my parents talking to me about. And they left the coaching stuff up to my coaches, which I think is actually really kind of a key thing.
So it's creating discipline as well. I mean, even things such as cleaning your boots is all discipline, and it's part of the overall performance and mindset, I imagine.
Yeah, it is. And I remember reading about a guy called Wayne Goldsmith who was in the Australian Institute of Sport, and his role was to identify athletes early for the 2000 Sydney Olympics. So he did a lot of research into this, and he created this kind of matrix around this commitment and skill thing, which very much at the time resonated with me and aligned with exactly how I thought as well. Is that there's two sides. You know, when I say that I was talent ID'd at primary school, I was. Now Wayne Goldsmith would say that there is no such thing as talent IDing, and that you can't pick an Olympian at the age of 8 and you can't pick an All Black at 12. But what you can look at is commitment of the child. Do they enjoy what they're doing? Do they turn it? How do they practice? Do they practice like they're playing, or do they just perform on game day? For my boys, I remember when they were younger and we were living in France at the time, they, after trainings, when it had been a muddy training, they had to clean their own boots because I bought the boots for them. But if they wanted to play rugby, they had to clean their boots. And when we got home from rugby, if they had rugby training the following day, they were responsible for washing their uniforms because it was their sport, their game. If I stepped in and tried to take over too much, then it became more about me and I was carrying the commitment load and leaving the skill load to them. And actually, in my mind and the way I think my parents brought me up, it was always the opposite. You have to commit to it. So they have to make their own food when they go on rugby tournaments. They have to pack their own bags. They have to get all this stuff organised. Because I think that, one of the really important things that Wayne Goldsmith would talk about was this matrix of skill and commitment, all right? And he would say, if you can imagine a box, and on one side is skill and on one side is commitment. And then we split them into low skill, low commitment, high commitment, right? Everyone will know the kids that have got really high skill but low commitment because they're the ones that we kind of say, oh, that kid would play for New Zealand if only they could get to training, if only they didn't sleep in, if only they ate better, if only they didn't have an anger problem. They're the frustrating kids because they've got so much potential, but you can never quite get them over the line, right? Because their commitment's low. And then you have the kids that have got high skill and high commitment, and they are your once in a generation players, right? That's the Tiger Woods, that's the Venus, the Williams sisters. They are once in a generation. But the kid you actually want to target is the kid that's got high commitment and low skill, because skill can be taught later on down the track, but commitment can't, right? So making your kids make their own lunch, pack their drink bottle, get their mouth guard organised, wash their own clothes, that's part of them committing to that sport. And, you soon find out when you're watching them practice if they actually really want to be there or not. You can soon tell because they drag their lip when they make a mistake. They don't help out with the team when they think that nobody's watching. They don't pick up the balls after training. They turn up and kind of have more of an aura of being a star, and I'll save my performance for game day. Whereas, we're looking for those, because I'm always looking at the kids that are great team players, that are coachable, that want to be at practice, that love training as much as the game, right? And those kids with low skill, they are the ones that every day of the week, they will pass the high skill kids as they get older because they're committed to it and they love what they do. And that's probably, joy is a massive part of it.
Yeah, commitment, I'm 100% behind you. It's you can, if you haven't got that commitment, as you said, you can be highly skilled at something or talented, but you don't have the commitment, it just goes nowhere. And I found that even going through education and schools and everything else, the really bright children didn't necessarily do well after school. It's the ones who were average students and worked really hard and were committed to learning were the ones who actually did well in business.
Yeah, well, 100%. And you sit there and you think yourself, in your own story, in your own life, your own timeline of life, how many kids did you know that did really well in something up until high school and then they got distracted with parties or a social life, right? Yep. That's low commitment, right? And the kids that have high commitment, I mean, I remember being at high school and sacrificing a lot, but I also remember doing a lot as well. I had fun as well. But, another proponent of it for me, and from what I recollect from how my parents did it as well, was that they encouraged me to play every single sport. So they knew from very early on that hockey was something I was very good at. And hockey was something that I loved because I loved training as much as I loved playing. And every opportunity I could, I had a stick and ball in hand up and down the driveway on my roller skates, in the lounge, against the wall of the house. I had a stick and ball all the time, right? So I had the commitment. But they also recognized, or they understood very early on, which was quite good, back then, we're talking 30, 40 years ago, that burnout was a thing. If you push your kids hard too young, that burnout is a thing. And so they really encouraged me to play every single sport. I played everything at high school that I could possibly enter myself into, but I always knew that hockey was the one sport that I wanted to play professionally. But I guess that the idea that they had behind that was that they wanted me to enjoy my sport as well, and they wanted me to be in situations where I wasn't under pressure to perform, and I wasn't under pressure to, constantly be on and to be training and to be thinking, diligently about that sport. So they wanted me to play everything. And so, coming back to New Zealand now, for my daughter in particular, who's 9 at the moment, we came back to New Zealand when she was 7. In France, there were really limited opportunities for her to play sport because the sporting system is very different. You pick a sport and you do that for one whole year. And there weren't many team sports available. So we came back to New Zealand and I said, just try everything. So in 2 years, she's done, athletics, swimming, triathlon, hockey, touch, ripper, like she's tried everything. And I think that's really great. And she hasn't landed on what she loves yet, and that's fine. We'll keep going until she lands on what she loves. And then she shows commitment to that. And once she shows commitment, then we'll push in behind her and we'll help her move forward in that.
Well, the big thing, she's been exposed to all those different sport opportunities.
Yeah, and it's not me picking. I'm not picking hockey for her. She's showing a real interest in triathlon at the moment because my husband's training for an Ironman. And that just scares the living bejeebers out of me because I don't understand individual sport. Right? I don't know how it works. I don't know how to be the parent of an individual sport, but I was kind of hoping she would play hockey, but she did one term of hockey and decided she doesn't like it. And next year, the next one she wants to do netball. So that's her decision, right? And like you said, she's being exposed and she will land on something. And then, where she falls in that matrix, if she falls in the low skill, low commitment, but she's fallen in love with the sport, brilliant. Right, I will push her there every day of the week because there's still a lot of joy to be had, and we have to celebrate the joy in those kids that have the low skill and the low commitment because they want to have fun, right? And who doesn't want a teammate that is there to have fun? So,
I think one of your points you make is quite critical, is that I've seen parents who will push their child into a particular sport, and it's probably because they're wanting their child to do what they could never do, and it just takes all the enjoyment away, and then the child's not there for their enjoyment. They're there because their parents are pushing them into, and then the commitment becomes something that they have to do because their parents make them do it. And
I see that a lot now, and I would say it's parents stealing ownership of the commitment. Right, so they're stealing it from the child and they're taking it because that's what they want and they want to push. And, I'm 100% behind the philosophy that you push a child too soon through the commitment of the parent, they will burn out. So a child winning at the age of 9, they're not necessarily winning at the age of 22, right? Because they are, and sometimes they do, right? So when I say that, I also say I always knew from very early on, I always knew that I'd play for New Zealand. It was never not a thought in my head. I remember having it from a very young age that, of course I'll play for New Zealand. It wasn't an ego thing. It was just that's what I wanted to do. So I had the commitment from very early on. And I would say that by the time I made the New Zealand and coming up through junior hockey, I was identified early because I had high skill and I was high commitment. So they probably thought, bit of bingo here. But as we went through and the other kids that had low skill but high commitment, as they, because we also physically develop at different ages, right? So skill can also be attributed, it can be misidentified as early physical development, as confidence because someone's bigger and faster than the other kids in their age group. And so as you kind of move through that puberty area, then you get the kids who had the low skill, but they've got the commitment and now they're working harder because they're committed and they overtake 80% of the kids, right? And I very much had I would say by the time I made the New Zealand team, I used to call myself a bit of a draft horse and that I had high commitment and I probably had average skill, but I worked really hard. Like my commitment was so high that I worked really hard and I made myself valuable, and that kept me in the game because I was a hard worker on the field. But if I didn't have the ability to watch that happening and watch other people taking over and realize, and my commitment fell away, then I would have fallen away. So commitment is the key to it all. The kids got to love what they're doing, and it doesn't have to be sport. It can be anything.
100%. Jamie, you've worked in the early childhood space looking at movement and brain development. in simple terms, what does movement actually do for a child's brain in those early years?
There is so much, so much. We need a whole different podcast just for that topic. And I'm racking my brains remembering back to when I was there. So yeah, I used to work.
We may need to have another podcast
Oh,
too.
we might
There's
have
a
to.
lot
And
of
I'll have to.
you're a wealth of knowledge. It's very enjoyable.
Oh, well, I'll have to dig back into my archives in my brain and remember all the information. But basically there was, it came out. Came out from the government. This whole program called Active Movement. And it went into early childhood centres, and we were looking at the link between brain development and movement in those 0 to 5 years. And basically what it was all around was how the brain develops. So how the brain develops is that when you're born, you're born with like 200 billion neurons in your brain, and they're all firing, but none of them are connected. And so what you're trying to do in the early years is you're trying to build connections in those neural pathways. And how we do that is repetition with movement. Repetition with words. It's all just about repetition. So, you'd often relate it to, if you're imagining you're trying to drive from Auckland to Wellington, and there's no state highway, there's just a back road that is bumpy and it's rocky, and sometimes the road ends and you got to go over the grass, and that's the road that you have to drive when you first start learning a new skill. And that would be like moving your arms, or from a very early age, or speaking. And then the more times you travel the path, the smoother the road becomes, until eventually it becomes automatic, and it's like driving on a highway, a motorway. You don't even have to think about it anymore. The connection has been made. So in early childhood, when it comes to movement, we're trying to connect the left and the right side of the brain. And how we're doing that is we are, doing opposite arm to opposite leg movements from the day the child is born. We are getting them to do eye tracking movements so that their eyes are moving in directions while their head stays still. We're looking for any kind of movement, and working with the reflexes that babies have when they're first born. And just trying to get children moving early so that those connections are built in the brain from day one, because we know that from about the age of 5 and 6, the window starts to close, where pathways can still be built after that age, in terms of, we're talking everything from the ability to empathize, to language skills, to movement skills, to how kids can connect with other kids. All of these kind of skills that the brain builds, the window kind of starts to close a bit from the age of 5 to 6. You can still communicate and you can still set pathways, but it's not as easy as it was in those first 6 years. So there was a real boom on trying to get early childhood kids moving, and the parents getting involved with that movement any way they could.
And one of the things that we're doing at Kiddywinkles is we've just developed our own program called Climb to Confidence, and it's focuses on social skills for children, right through from babies, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-olds. So by the time they get to school, they have all those social skills. And a lot of the ones in terms of brain development you're talking about are covered in us, in terms of empathy, being able to socialize, communicate, work with, play with, coordinate with other children. So it's a very exciting program we've got that.
Yeah.
Because, and the reason we developed it is a lot of schools are saying that children are not ready for primary school. And as you said, by the time they get to primary school, they've missed that opportunity, the key learning opportunity in those early years, those fundamental years.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because our kids have been to school in 4 different countries. So they've been to school in the UK, like Dublin, Wales, France, and then back in New Zealand now. So I've seen early childhood across all 4 of those spaces. And I would say the thing that I love about New Zealand the most is this real learning through movement, learning through play thing in the early years. I think that's brilliant, because what we know about the ability for a child to hold a pen is that if they don't have the pincer grip and they haven't developed the grip strength, they can't hold a pen and write. And so getting kids out and using their bodies and using their movement and strengthening their muscles, is really key to that, to building confidence in the classroom, so that by the time they hit school, they don't actually, a child who can't write by the time they hit school but has developed all of those muscle strengths around their arms and around their body and their coordination will probably take over any kid who turns up but doesn't have the muscular strength in their arms to be able to write and hold their pen properly, right? Because we know that the kids are ready to learn once they get to school. They don't have to have done all the learning beforehand. That is what school is for. And we've just come out of a French school system where it's very, very different to New Zealand. And from the age of 4, they are at school from 8 till 5 or 8 till 4 p.m. They have, they are rote learning, spelling words. They are having to recite poetry every second week in front of the entire class. Like, there is no learning through play, and it's a very different system than what we have in New Zealand. So I think it's wonderful that there are programs like Climbing to Confidence, and that we're understanding that movement is crucial to learning further down the line, and that we don't need to, it's very easy to get caught up in the, what is everyone else in the mothers group, what are their kids doing, and well, my kid's not. I mean, Lily didn't walk until she was 24 months, my 9-year-old. She bum shuffled, right? Which we all know, bum shuffling. Crawling is brilliant because opposite arm, opposite leg, it creates all the connections across the brain. And I knew that as a parent. And I'm thankful she was my third child, because if she was my first, I would have panicked. But as a third child, I was like, well, you know what? This kid will develop as she wants to develop and as she's ready to develop. And all I did was I just got her on her back when I could, and I just did opposite leg, opposite arm movements with her, and made her climb ladders and got her crawling on the ground to play fun games once she was walking. She's 9 and she is out running other, she's out doing it all. She's not been inhibited at all by the fact that she bum shuffled or didn't walk till 2. So I think we sometimes need to also take the pressure off ourselves as parents and not be looking at what the other parents are doing. And be looking at what our own child is doing and making sure that confidence, I actually think creating confidence in children is so important. And we do that through moving, through being able to understand how their body fits in space, how they move around, their periphery. All of this stuff is just really, really crucial to kids being able to build confidence in themselves. And then when they hit school, they're ready to go. And you've got great kids.
We're very much on the same wavelength there, Jamie. Now, you've experienced elite sport, and you've experienced winning, and you've experienced losing, and it's pretty tough when you lose, and your confidence can be knocked around and everything else. How did you cope with those situations, and how did your parents support you through those sorts of situations?
Yeah, it's interesting because thankfully I had high commitment through my childhood, because I had, I joke with my boys now, because my 2 boys are 16 and 14 and they are rugby mad, and they'll say things to me like, yeah, but Mum, did you win this tournament? And I was like, well, actually I won every national tournament from primary school right up to seniors. I won every single, I got on all the tournament teams. I didn't get dropped from anything until I made the New Zealand team. So I made the New Zealand team, and then that was pretty much one of the first times that I got dropped. And so, for my parents, I do remember them the whole time. The thing in the back of my mind was, you are never bigger than the team. You are never bigger than the sport. You are never, you should always be working on yourself, and you should always be trying to make your game better, and you always need to focus on what you're doing and how you're impacting other people. That's very much the message that came through to me, and that's very much the message that I carried. And and I do remember when I got dropped, having a conversation with the coach, and just being pretty devastated about it at first, because I think you have to take time, because you worked pretty hard for something. And I do remember it coming as a shock. I wasn't expecting it and didn't see it coming, but so you take a bit of time, and I think that's quite normal, and be upset for yourself, and be upset for the work that you put in, and be upset for, I think that's okay to grieve that way, but what's not okay is to point the finger at anyone else. And my parents were the first ones to say, if I came and said, but how did that person get in ahead of me? Or, but I did this, but they didn't see me do that. That just was not a conversation that was tolerated, because it's not anyone's fault. As you go through life, and especially in these young years, right, there's going to be a lot of coaches that come into your path that are going to say you're not good enough. that's an indicator of their experience and their thought and what they think talent and commitment looks like. But if you actually love what you do, then you'll just keep going and you'll go, okay, well, I understand that. I appreciate that. I respect your decision, but I think I am good enough. And so I'm going to keep going. Right. And so I think that's the mindset that I would encourage in my kids is that, and it is what I will talk to my kids about. I say to them, if you don't make something, I'm like, okay, well, that's their perspective and their experiences, and we respect that. But if you think you're good enough and this is what you want to do, you keep going until the next person, until you find someone who does believe in you. And that's what I remember having the conversation with my coach and saying, okay, so tell me, what can I do to be better? How did I lose my place? What is it that you think I need to do? Where can I challenge myself? And those are the questions. It's not, as a parent, it's not my place to turn up to my child and say, okay, but if you trained harder and if you ate better and if you went out and did those skills that we talked about you doing, that I told you should have done, that's not going to work. The kids have got to figure it out for themselves. And I remember having a hard conversation with one of my sons once, and he said, I'm just not sure how this coach sees me. I said, well, I'm not having that conversation with your coach. You need to go and have that conversation with your coach. And I've had it with them for their teachers as well. I've said, I'm not having that conversation with your teacher. You have it. And then if you want to put me in on an email or you want me to follow up with the teacher, I will. But you need to have the conversation because this is important to you. Because that's just part of that whole ownership, right? And you can't do that when the kids are obviously at primary school, but you can as they start to get older if you've built that commitment and confidence in them.
But you're teaching that responsibility, and I think that is one of the key things that I've taken away from our conversation is the responsibility and the commitment. And commitment is massive. You can't take away the importance of commitment in achieving anything.
And I think I always think back to that Wayne Goldsmith, and I think how he thinks about and looks at. He doesn't even call it talent identification because he thinks you can't talent ID in kids at all. But I often think about the fact, I think building kids for greatness, which is what this podcast is about. It's not about creating a champion at the age of 12. It's about building humans who still love learning, who still love putting in effort, and who still love challenge at the age of 22. Right? Because those kids will surpass that kid who was a champion at 12 every day of the week if that kid didn't have the high commitment to start. They just had, maybe and another way I look at it is I always remember my oldest son, he didn't start playing rugby until under 14. So I turned up to the under 14 training in France and I took him along to the first training. And of course, he's a boy, right? So half the boys in the team had gone through puberty and half of them hadn't. And my son hadn't. And he was tiny. And I remember standing on the sideline and panicking, thinking, what have I done? Like, he's going to get smashed. But he wanted to do it, right? And at the start of the year, it was really interesting. So the big, strong kids who were a bit faster and stronger, they were ID'd as the future talent for this club, right? Oh, these kids are brilliant. So they became the core of the team. But by the time the year ended, that had flipped, because when the kids who hadn't gone puberty caught up, right, then all of a sudden those kids, they come and they surpass the other kids because their commitment was higher and they started working a bit harder, and their physical ability caught up with those other kids. Then you start seeing who's got commitment. Then you start seeing who's actually going to rise to the top. And I had a similar conversation with my 14-year-old where at the end of the season, he was the fastest by a mile. And at the start of the next season, he had dropped back significantly. And he was like, Mum, why am I not fast? Like, what can I do? And I said, well, we need to look at the fact that these kids have gone through puberty and you haven't yet. So you'll catch up, right? So that this whole year is just going to be a year for you to just find other areas that you can exploit in your skill base. But speed might be one that's going to come to you once you hit puberty and you start to climb up again. But don't be patient, be patient, be patient.
The interesting thing is that commitment is a skill or an attribute that you have. And if you've got it, it's with you for life. And whatever you do, whether it's sport, business, personal life, that commitment, if you've got it, that's ahead of everybody, or 95% of people.
Yeah. And, they always say that, there was a bit of a thing where they started calling it the sporting CEO or something. They started, corporate started looking for high performing sports people to cross over into the corporate world because if there's one thing we understand, it's commitment and learning and taking constructive feedback and being better and better and better. And so, for me, I look, when we came back to New Zealand and I was thinking about what am I going to do for a career option here, I'm looking at everything going, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that, but nothing on my CV would suggest it. So I don't get a job anywhere. But I know that I taught myself to be a website design and developer and write code because I wanted to start my own business while we were overseas. I know that I taught myself how to work in the early childhood sector because that's the area I wanted to go in. Like, there's nothing I cannot teach myself because my commitment is high to whatever it is that I choose to set my mind to. And that's just, and because I spent years and years honing that, that's like a lifelong skill I have now. Once I decide to do something or someone asks me to do something, my commitment level is high for it, and I will achieve above anyone else who has got low commitment over in the corner and just doing their job because they want to. Hire a sports person, get someone who's been out of the game for a while to come back, and they will absolutely, work well.
Thanks, Jamie. I hope that some of your words are muffled. I hope we haven't lost a bit of internet. Anyway, we'll see how we go. Look, we could talk for ages because you've got so much wonderful information. If I just one last question, as a mum with teenage children, and what do you hope your children will take from movement and sport, even if they never compete or play at a high level?
One, I think sport teaches you so many things. It teaches you how to conflict management. It teaches you how to get along in a team situation. It teaches you how to handle rejection. It teaches you how to be a gracious champion. And you use those in all walks of life, right? But for my kids in particular, and for any parent that's thinking about watching their kid at sport and feels that inclination to want to push them and overcoach them from the sideline, I would say celebrate the effort over their skill, and I would say protect their joy in the game, because if they don't love it, they will stop playing it, right? So make sure that above all else they are loving what they do, because their talent will catch up, but commitment at the end of the day will always tell the truth. That is always the thing that you need to be nurturing and looking for above all else, I think.
Thank you, Jamie. I love your words. 100% behind your commitment. That's the way I've always lived my life, and that's the way we want our children coming through our centres to get that commitment to whatever they do, and whether that's helped through us with the climb to confidence that we are doing, helping their social skills, helping them become become in love with what they're doing, and we can support them in any way like that. You've been wonderful. I really appreciate your time. Our listeners will enjoy some of the gems that you have given, and I really appreciate it. And maybe we can do another one at some stage with another topic on what you're so skilled at.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I know I feel like we could have talked for ages, so I appreciate the time. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Jamie.